All-Star weekend's over and the Celtics are straight back to winning ways. They whooped the Sixers. We're going to talk about all that and more on today's episode of the Celtics Chronicle. A blowout. They absolutely bitch slapped the Sixers in this game. I'm loving the way they played. There was a lot of similarities between how the Celtics played against the Sixers in this game and how they beat the Knicks on opening night of the season. Fully healthy, Drew Holiday back in the rotation. Lots to break down, lots to kind of compartmentalize here. I'm Adam Taylor. You've probably seen me around on Celtics blog, USA Today, heavy.com, yardbarker.com, and most importantly, the Celtics Chronicle newsletter. Links in the description. Make sure you go sign up. I'm joined by my homie, compadre, co-host in crime, Mr. Billy Calabrese. What's going on, Billy?
Hey, that was a belt to ass game, or as it's been called on Twitter, a Celt to ass game. That's the new catchphrase going around.
Celt to ass?
Yep, because
I don't know
instead
how
of
I
a
feel
belt to
about
ass,
that one.
yeah, that's a little weird.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that one. I'll tell you what, though, I'll take whatever name you want to throw out there if this is the type of production you get. I think I want to start straight away with just Drew Holiday and him being back in the rotation and what he provides. You saw him cross match with Joel Embiid multiple times. Got underneath him, got underneath his hips, made life difficult. Embiid got some mobility issues right now anyway. You could see he was wearing that brace on his knee. What I liked was the whole system behind that was, hey, we're going to get Drew Holiday on a cross match and we're going to have KP on the weak side rotate over to provide secondary rim protection once Embiid faces up, because he's not going to try and hook it in. He's going to want to face up, back down Holiday, face up, and then go up. So as he faced up, all of a sudden he had a 7-foot Porzingis rotating over with a hand in his face. Just a really good way of making life difficult for Embiid to get post position, like good post position, and then making life really tough for him around the rim. He's not at 100%, but honestly, I think that the way this Celtics team played him is kind of gave a blueprint for other teams to deal with Embiid, especially until he gets that knee surgery and he's back to 100%. Wouldn't be shocked if they shut him down. But Drew Holiday did his thing out there, man, on both sides of the floor.
It was bait. Like they kept putting Drew on him, and then Embiid thought he had like a mismatch, and then everybody would come in, and then Embiid would fall over. A couple times he got the call, but it seemed like the refs were kind of onto it, and he was really unplayable. And then if you go to the other side of the court, we just attacked him every chance we got. We got him in every switch possible, and he really was borderline unplayable, which is really kind of sad to see. That surgery has to happen because this is not the same player that won MVP.
No, it's not. And that's the concern, right? It's always been the concern with Embiid was, can his body hold up later in his career? And as we start to edge into that, what should be his prime years, to be honest with you, he's not looking great. But in terms of what the Celtics did to kind of rattle him, defensively, it was Drew Holiday. Offensively, it was create those screens early, a lot of drag actions in transition, pull Embiid out towards the perimeter, and then just cook him off the dribble. And we've seen the Celtics do this to every big in the NBA this season. It's not just Embiid. They'll put the big in the action early, get the ball into Tatum's hands or Brown hands, and then just crack him off the bounce. Because there's no way that a big is going to have the hip mobility to stay in front of guys or stay connected to guys when you've got Jalen Brown or Jayson Tatum getting downhill off one or two dribbles. That's where I think, but it's where I think Drew Holiday's value comes as a connector, right? Because you can have him set those you can have him operate in that cross match on defense, but then you can have him sprint the floor, operate as like an initiator or a connector. Maybe his cuts open up some extra room to try and crack a player off the dribble like that. I just think his overall value as like a veteran is really important. And I know a lot of people look at that contract he signed and see him as the most tradable player in the summer. But when you see him do this to a former MVP, and when you see what he brings offensively, there was a few possessions where he just ripped and run and then kind of like snaked his dribble off a drag screen himself and beat somebody, sometimes Embiid, sometimes Paul George, whoever, down to the rim, and then made a rim read either to finish or kick out. I just think Holiday's been super important. Well, was super important. And if he's healthy, he's going to be important the rest of the way.
No, he's the stabilizer, and it's not just on defense, it's on offense as
Yeah.
well. The way he stabilizes the offense, you notice that everybody is where they're supposed to be. And I know that's him. That's a lot of the time that's calling out where to go, who to be on, like where to switch. Like if somebody's in the wrong spot, he's the most vocal. And we need that kind of vocal, especially on the defensive end, which is you could always see him pointing and yelling when guys are supposed to switch or not switch or whatever it may be. but I mean, his leadership is so valuable. I can't picture this team without it. So whenever somebody puts him in a trade rumor, I just like want to rip my hair out because I'm like, you guys do realize how important like this guy is. It might not show up in the box score, but it is certainly an impact on the court.
Yeah, and I think that he's not the only guy that has that level of impact. You see D White do that, you see JT do that. Al Horford has been doing that for years. But the more guys you have that are willing to be vocal leaders, willing to call out defensive coverage, to call out opposing teams' plays, to get into the thick of things, not just in terms of being on ball, but being off ball, willingly putting your body in the way. The more guys you have like that, the better the culture is overall. And you could hear in the TNT broadcast towards the end of the game the way they were just talking about Boston's overall culture and the way everybody's on the same page and they're playing for each other. Holiday's a huge part of that. I think that once he came into this team and got settled, he quickly established himself as an important voice. When he's not on the floor, you feel it, you do. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think he's going to be a guy that gets you 20 and 26 and 4 a game or whatever it may be. He can do that. We've seen him be a second option on a high level team, but he doesn't need to be that. What we saw against the Sixers is the ideal version of Drew Holiday, in my opinion. Knock down some perimeter shots, guard opposing bigs, switch onto wings, switch onto perimeter guys. You know, you saw possessions where he was trying to pick up Maxey, possessions where he was switched onto Embiid. A couple of times he'd try and stop Paul George. He's just willing to take on the tough assignments. And then when you've got Brown, Holiday, and Derek White all willing to do that across the perimeter, it's really tough to figure out ways to beat this Steez.
No, and Nurse was really struggling to figure out a way. He said that, you know, it wasn't had nothing to do with all the threes made that they switched to zone. Like, hey, what difference does it make? They're gonna hit threes in man, they're gonna hit threes in zone. I thought it was just to hide Embiid because Embiid was just getting picked apart by Jayson Tatum. And then obviously we saw that really benefited Luke Kornet. Luke Kornet had another night.
Luke Kornet has been ridiculous, dude. And I take notes during games. So I take notes, I pull clips, I kind of have a system. One of the notes I've got is a growing two-man game between Tatum and Kornet, and it's been there for a while, but it just seems to keep evolving. They've really got a feel for how to get the best out of each other. Tatum and Kornet with those pocket passes work really well. There's a couple of times where you'd see Kornet kind of go into a keep action and wait for Tatum to come off a screen, or they'd flow into a keep DHO, which is becoming a staple this year. Get Kornet at the top. It doesn't have to be Kornet, Porzingis, Quater. They ran it with all of them against the Sixers. Run a guy towards the DHO, the big man will keep it, and then it'll flow into a zoom action. They run that for Tatum, they run that for Brown. Cornet's ability to then roll and create like confusion. There was a play early, I think it was in the first quarter, and they did exactly that basically. And as Kornet rolled, two players went with Kornet, and then the point of attack guy got confused, didn't know if he was meant to switch, looked behind himself, and it ended up in an open three. It's just Kornet's threat in that roll position, short roll, full roll, what if you want to call it that, is so dangerous. I mean, I put a post out on the Celtics Chronicle the other day. Links in the description, everybody. And one of the most interesting facts to me was Kornet is averaging, what was it, 2.7 points per assist. So many of his assists are coming like off that short roll and redirecting back out to a shooter on the perimeter because he's sucking guys in. You can't leave a 7 foot dude roll into the rim without collapsing. And his ability to make reads out of that is so important that now he has actual gravity as a roll man. He has genuine roll gravity. And that's just opened things up for everybody, including himself.
It's unbelievable. His reaction time is what impresses me so much because for a big man, a lot of times when they get the ball, their first instinct is to bring the ball down and just wait. He always makes the right decision, and it's always fast. He's either
Yeah.
finding the other player that he's setting up. He's either going to the basket, he's going to score. I mean, his reaction time is unbelievable, and I wish there was a way to track that because I'd put him up against any other big in the league. The way he makes decisions so quickly, like read and react at just a microscopic level.
It's often referred to as processing speed. So the best players in the league have elite processing speed, which means they can see the floor, understand what's going on the floor, and make decisions at split seconds. And that's where that like 0.5 offense comes into things. And you heard this a bunch under Udoka. And then Missoula came in and didn't really speak about it, but kind of refined those principles. And if anyone follows me or you've read anything that I've put out or you've watched me on any podcast for the last 2, 3 years, you'll hear me talk about point five. And that is basically the concept was born out of like Mike D'Antoni when he was with the Suns. And that was 7 seconds or less. And then it kind of got shaved down and refined into this point five, where it's you've got point five of a second to make a decision what you're going to do with the ball. You're either going to pass, dribble, or shoot. And you make that decision in like a split, like the hair of a second, and then you execute. You don't have to execute in point five of a second. You just have to know what you're going to do. And I think that Kornet is an exemplary example, or Kornet is exemplary, I should say, of that system because he always has that idea of what he wants. As soon as that ball's in his hands, it's touch passes. Or if he doesn't make that split decision, somebody's making one off of what he does. Like Tatum makes elite quick reads off of Kornet's movements. So does Brown, to be fair. We've seen Derek White kind of feast off there. Derek White, I know he needs to lift out of a corner into that wing spot because Kornet prefers to throw it out towards the elbows than he does throw it out towards the corner. I don't know why. I think that's just because of his body positioning. But again, that point five offense, it has been a staple of the Celtics approach when they're at their best. And I think Kornet actually really fits well with what they do.
Oh, I think it's more than fits well. I think he's crucial. I think he's I mean, it's going to be the story of the summer, what they do with him. They have to find a way to re-sign him. There's just
Yeah.
no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
And that comes into the question of like, people talk about maybe you have to move on from Drew. Maybe you need to maybe Horford retires and that frees up some money somewhere. I mean, the Celtics are in a position where it's actually easier to keep the dudes that they've got rather than it is to add new guys. That's just the way the second apron is constructed. I think Kornet needs to stick around long term. And what I like most is 4 years ago, maybe five, he was really clawing to stay in the NBA. And now he's an essential part of the championship rotation. What I see people calling him the best third big in the NBA. I generally kind of roll with that. I think that's a great way of putting it. As a third string big man, he's elite. I trust him to step up into a bigger role when needed. I trust him to accept a smaller role when needed. And that developing kind of two-man game between him and Tatum, just knowing what each other want to do, knowing where each other are going to be on the floor, screening well for each other, that has become a weapon when that second unit's out there. And I can see the vision that Mazzulla had now when he moved Tatum into running that second unit instead of Brown this season. It does flow better with Tatum on the floor just because Tatum's so much more of a connector than what Brown is. So I'm really enjoying this kind of developing two-man game there. I think Tatum and Pritchard are playing really well together as well. So that kind of switch that we were bitching about to start the year a little bit is actually starting to pay dividends now.
Especially the double big aspect of it. I mean, it's become kind of a staple. And Mazzulla had a comment before the game about it. He expected to actually have to play double big more in the playoffs last year, but injuries and situations just never asked for it. But he does have any doubts that they're going to need it this year with the way, the East and whoever comes out of the West, we're going to need those double big lineups. And I mean, it's just so crucial. And what I like about him is it kind of turns Tatum into the de facto point guard of those lineups as well.
Yeah, point forward. And I've been vocal about why I think that some double big lineups actually hurt the Celtics. I like the fluidity of having a single big. I like having five decision makers on the floor at once. Five guys that can read and react, but not only by passing the ball, by putting it on the floor, by shooting. Porzingis is great at that. Al Horford is great at that. Why I don't mind it with Kornet on the floor is Kornet is a decision maker. He makes decisions in different ways. His movement is essential to keeping the ball flowing, the way he screens, the way he rolls, the way he passes. He's still a decision maker. The only difference is he's not somebody you want trying to beat someone off the bounce. And I'm fine with that because you've got four other guys that can do it, and you're running this five out with Porzingis at the top in the delay, or Horford in the corner, and then you've got Kornet on the weak side slot, spacing the floor out that way, then setting screens and rolling. I don't mind it. I'd prefer not to have to lean on it too much. That's why I think Tory Craig was a good pickup in that sense. But the results speak for themselves, so you can't bitch about something that's working well.
Yeah, and especially how the other bigs just play off each other. I mean, there's any combination you do of those four guys, it works. I mean, whether it's, Al and KP, Luke and Al, KP and Luke, like we could just play musical chairs and it gives teams everyone every one of them is a different look that a team has to like adjust to, and it gives them problems.
I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the Luke and KP. I think that there's a bit of clankiness there. I think there's too much crossover in size and limited mobility in certain aspects. I'm not a huge fan. I don't mind it because the rim protection is ridiculous. Two 7-foot dudes, one rotating as a weak side roamer. You've got Jayson Tatum then pinching off the wing. Whoever's playing guard positions are usually super switchable. So you have great size. You can put JB in the two and just go really big. I'm not a massive fan, but for possessions, a 2-minute stretch here and there, I think it can work.
I think against like the bigger teams that are a little less mobile, I think that would work pretty well, but it just kind of depends. That is probably the weakest of the combos. I will admit that. You mentioned Tory Craig. I mean, I thought he just showed tonight why he's on the team, and Lonnie Walker, Lamar Stevens, and all these other guys that everybody kind of wanted aren't. I mean, he didn't score a point, he didn't take a shot. He had 3 blocks, a couple rebounds, and a couple assists. So it's like he's doing all the other things. Well, those other guys would just be like, I mean, obviously Lonnie would just be a scorer, and Lamar would just be a defender, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. I think Lonnie, for me, I was always out on Lonnie. You can go back to the summer and the receipts are there. If you want to find them, they're there. I didn't see the need in adding another ball handling guard that needed the ball in his hand to be super effective. I didn't see the value of Lonnie as an off ball scoring threat because he's going to need to catch and rip, or he's not really going to be a catch and shoot guy. And Pritchard already has that role and does it better than Lonnie Walker does. Lonnie didn't have the defense to kind of slot into that rotation and make sense for me. So I was against Lonnie from jump. I didn't mind the idea of a Lamar Stevens or an O'Shea Brissett. I think Tory Craig is filling that role perfectly. I do think it's hard to judge based on the minutes he got because a lot of those minutes came in like, development time, garbage time. So it's hard to kind of really gauge what type of impact he's going to make as part of the main rotation. But I do think he's going to be part of that rotation. I think we're going to see quite a bit of Tory Craig. He didn't do himself no harm in this game. That one block, I think it was the first block where he got up and like repositioned it and just swatted that shit. That was electric. And I think that one of the most underrated aspects of Craig's game, and even I was underrating it for a stretch, was he's an athlete, man. He's really, really bouncy. He's got some hops. He can rotate quick. He can navigate screens well. He's got good size. We saw him operate as a screener a lot during that stretch that he had. He's screening for Tatum, screening for Pritchard. He's gonna fit, and he kind of fits what the Celtics needed as well. He plugs a significant gap on that rotation.
For him to be able to just fit in without having to take a shot, just is what separates him from the other guys to me. And that's why I do think that he could eventually get some minutes. The problem is, I mean, do you ever see a situation they're going to play 9, 10 guys in a playoff series?
I think it depends, right? Like, is somebody banged up? Do they need a minutes restriction? I think that every player that's not in that top 8 rotation right now is an insurance policy. And playoff games are quite unpredictable in the sense that sometimes you're going to need to do something that maybe you didn't feel like was necessary. So I don't think they're going to go 9 or 10 deep, but I do think there'll be times where Craig matches up better with somebody than Hauser does, in terms of a two-way threat, right? And we've seen Hauser struggled with his back at times. So I'm not saying that they're going to go 9 or 10 deep, but I think there will be stretches of games or stretches within games where going 9 deep with Craig coming off the bench actually makes sense just in terms of matchups, game flow, minute management. There's going to be a lot of different aspects to this. The Celtics are coming in as the champions, so they're going to be getting more physical opponents. They're going to be getting punched in the mouth early. Just having that extra body that can help, especially if Hauser's having a bad night, not having to force him into tough positions, but then pulling Craig off the bench and being like, yo, just be a two-way like connector, a two-way little 3-and-D threat. There's times when that's going to be valuable. So I do think he'll get some play, but I'm not expecting him to be like a big part of the rotation or anything like that.
And I saw a lot of people roasting Hauser's defense tonight. I mean, one, it's Paul George. That's a tough matchup for him. Two,
For anybody?
yeah, exactly. It's like, really, you're really mad that Paul George hit like a bad mid-range shot over Hauser? Like, you really expected? I don't know what they expect. Every time Hauser gets scored on, all of a sudden it turns into bad defense. It's like, no, sometimes good offense beats good defense. Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that.
And if we're
But
setting the bar, sorry, just to cut if we're setting the bar of defensive, you need to be able to shut down a multi-time all-star. At one point was classed as one of the prototypical wings in the NBA. A lot of players coming into the league now grew up idolizing Paul George. Tatum was one of them. He spoke about how Paul George was one of his favorites. If that's the bar, then there's a lot of bad defense in the NBA that isn't getting called out. I'm sorry, but that's just a ridiculously high bar to set for anybody.
And like I said, it's so stupid because a lot of times the people that are making these comments, they don't know that like we're forcing these players into the shots we want them to shoot. We want Paul George to take 19 footers. That's a low percentage shot. Maybe he'll hit a few. Yes, sure. But he's not going to be able to do that over time. And over the game, he did not.
It's the same as like when Max is getting downhill. So the Sixers ran a bunch of like pinch DHOs specifically for Maxi. They ran a lot of Iverson for Paul George. They ran a lot of pinch DHOs for Maxi. Or they'd come off of like a Maxi would run like an Iverson pinch DHO. Whatever. But the point I'm getting at is the Celtics were willing to let Maxi get that DHO and get downhill because they'd rather let him score two than they would let him come off a pin down, catch the ball, and drain a three. Because the way the Celtics were shooting, the math game was always going to mean that you allowed the twos in order to get up the floor quickly and generate another 3-point shot. So I think that even with Maxi, while he was a problem, especially with his speed, you saw sometimes he'd pull the ball out a little bit and then just drop his shoulder and get downhill. You can live with that because he's taking twos. And you've got Peyton Pritchard that's going on a mad heater right now, hitting 3 after 3 in this game. The math game's always going to win. So it's the same thing again. It's allowing guys to get the shots that work for you based on your approach and how the game's working. Now, if the Celtics weren't shooting great from 3, I guarantee they're going to find a way to take Paul George's mid-range game away. I guarantee they're going to clog the lane more when Max is coming off a DHO and he's trying to get to the rim. Because now they're not shooting great from deep. They need to stop those twos because Boston's shot profile has to change. The math has to change, which means your defensive coverage on the flip side has to change.
Yeah, when you have a game where basically essentially everybody's hitting threes, you're not going to have to worry about a lot of that. But I did think that Maxey was really ineffective for the most part in a way that we don't usually see against the Celtics because usually he's a Celtics killer. I thought they did adjust. I mean, he got his couple breaks to the basket.
He's going to do what he does.
But I thought he was as ineffective as you could hope for.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just about containing a guy. You've got to contain, and there's 3 of them on this Sixers team that you just need to live with being contained. They're going to get their buckets. They're going to do what they do. Can you make life hard? Can you limit them from going off? Did they have a good game? Yeah. Did they go nuclear? No. All right, then that's a win. We'll take that. We'll move on. Did we shut down the role players? Yes. Great. Then everything you needed to do, you did. I'm not a big fan of the Sixers team. I think that they've been expensively constructed. There's some clear points where they're struggling right now. There's some weaknesses in that rotation. Building around Embiid and Paul George was always a risk. I was vocal about this during the summer. 2 guys with extensive injury issues, extensive amounts of games missed, and you're putting them together and expecting that to lead to a championship. That was, I don't understand the thought process there, to be quite honest with you. That's good for Boston. It's one less team they have to worry about in the postseason. I genuinely wouldn't be shocked if we go another 9, 10, 12 games into the season just to hear that Philly is shutting it down.
No, that kind of felt like the death blow to get embarrassed like that on national TV. There's already rumblings that Nurse might be out. Daryl Morey's job's obviously on the line. And then it's going to really come down to what Embiid does. Like, why isn't he shutting down now and having this surgery so that way he can have a summer to rehab and be able to hopefully be 100% for camp? I mean, I don't understand what they're waiting for at this point.
Yeah, when you sign Paul George to a multi-year deal, the hope is that you get 1 year with him and Embiid healthy at the same time. If you get 1 season with him, Embiid, and Maxey healthy all at once, and you get a deep championship run, maybe it's not to a chip, but maybe you get to the finals, then the experiment's worked and you can be happy, or at least you can feel a little bit better about yourself. But the chance of those 2 guys being healthy at once, the chance of Maxey being happy with the way this team's going right now, there's a lot of ifs, buts, and maybes. The process is over, man. The process didn't work. You trusted it. It didn't work. There's some bad decisions along the way. Don't know how that feels being a Celtics fan because our process worked perfectly.
Yeah. At the end of the game, it was odd. It almost felt like the end of a playoff series where like a team was eliminated. The way Embiid went up to Tatum and they talked for a while. Then Embiid was hugging Al and they talked for a while. Cassell went over to Maxey, who obviously was a big influence on Maxey's development when Cassell was an assistant in Philly. It was just really odd to see how like those players were just so like just defeated, and then
It's
it's
a
like
keep your head up moment, right?
it was really odd to see it. It really felt like the end of a playoff series.
It's an end of an era. That's what it is. And I'm cool with it. So the last thing I want to touch on real quick, I just want to point it out there. I feel like he deserves some flowers. Sometimes I feel like we can be quite critical of him. I feel like the entire fan base at times is critical of him. There's definitely a divide between like the pro Jalen Brown and like the non Jalen Brown kind of crowds. I kind of sit firmly in the middle. Sometimes I think he's brilliant. Sometimes I wonder. But for the most part, I understand that he's a top 15 forward in the NBA. I love having him on the team. So maybe I do actually lean more pro Jalen Brown than not. But one thing that's really impressed me this season that I don't think we've spoke about or has been spoke about much is his transition play. So we saw that one play in, I think it was in the third, it might have been earlier than that, where Tatum gets the ball in transition as like a pitch ahead pass. Tatum gets it, throws the lob to JB. JB hits that monster dunk, lets it get off, that fucking above the rim, get off me type guttural scream. Made me wonder how Jalen Brown's doing in transition. So I've gone over to Synergy. Now I'm going to put this on the screen so everybody can see. I'm going to read it out too because I'll do that in post edit. I went on to Synergy and I filtered by transition, total points scored with a minimum of 100 transition possessions. So just filtering out low usage guys and then having like the best transition players listed for total points scored, not field goal percentage, not attempts, just total points. Jaylen Brown leads the NBA with 619 transition points this season. That is in total 242 makes of 415 attempts, shooting 58.3% from the field. You factor in the threes with the affected field goal percentage, that comes in at 63.7%. Second in the NBA is Giannis with 569 points. Third is Shai, 566. Fourth is Ant, 562. And fifth is LeBron with 533. So some elite company there. And with Brown being at number one, I feel like that's just a really interesting little bit of data that we can look at.
No, I mean, don't you always just feel great when it's Jalen on the fast break? Like I always feel
Yeah.
it's going to end up in a bucket, and it does. I would actually compare it to like prime Westbrook of all people, just because it's just going to be 1,000 miles per hour going to the basket, and nobody's going to be able to get in the way and stop him. It's awesome.
Yeah. I feel like transition Jalen's one of the best Jalen. Mid-range Jalen's my favorite Jalen. Transition Jalen's my second favorite Jalen. Same guy, but we're just compartmentalizing. To be number one in the NBA in transition for over 100 possessions, that's like a heavy usage rate for transition basketball. I'm impressed. I'm just going to go across, see if I'm missing any data here. His scoring, I'm 56.2%. Now, if we filter by score percentage, things change a little bit. Jaylen Brown actually drops drastically. He's 44th in the league for scoring percentage. So scores on 56.2% of his attempts. That's actually low. But the fact that he's just scoring total points is up because he's hitting more threes than a lot of people, just because of the way the Celtics plays. I mean, he's 45 of 99 in transition threes this season. That's a 45.5%. That's boosted his total points up, which, you can make numbers fit your narrative however you want. And this is the way I want them to fit my narrative. So he's first in the league in total points.
I'm really impressed with Jalen this year. It was a rocky start. He had an injury. He missed some time. When he came back, he wasn't quite himself, but he's really got a groove right now. And with so many people that have basically disqualified for All NBA at this point, not only is Jalen a lock for All NBA, I think he has a real good chance at second team.
Yeah. He's not a first team guy. Jayson Tatum's got that sewn up. But it's second team All NBA, third team All NBA. I think that he's got a puncher's chance at either of those. Could he get another conference finals or finals MVP? Who knows? I feel like Tatum's definitely gone in for that finals MVP this year. But Brown has been fantastic. There's times where it frustrates you, the turnovers, the turnover to assist rate. He's been forced into more of an on-ball role this year, so that's been a little bit messy at times, but it's also been good at times. We've definitely seen growth there. Defense, I'd like to see him kind of step up to the version that we saw last year, and I'm hoping we do now the All-Star break's over. But overall, he's been solid all year. I feel like there's always an area you can pick holes in, guys, but there's plenty more to praise than there is to kind of have an issue with.
Now, his playmaking leap, it deserves a lot of flowers. His ball handling deserves a lot of flowers. These are things he's constantly criticized on, and he has got better. Joe has given him the chance to anchor some of those bench units with mixed results. But the fact that you can actually sit Tatum and still have a positive rating on this team, finally, is a huge improvement.
And with that, I'm going to say, make sure you're subscribing to the channel. Make sure you're commenting. Look, just show some love, man. Just show some love. Also, make sure you go over to the Celtics Chronicle newsletter, hit subscribe there. There's posts coming out thick and fast. Now the season's back. I did take a break during the All-Star break. That's why it's called the All-Star break. Go and show me some love over on Instagram. I'm slowly moving over there more and more. Show Billy some love over on Letterboxd because Billy is our resident movie expert. Billy, where can they find you on Letterboxd, bro?
CBO041. RIP David Lynch. We've been doing David Lynch movies all week, so it's been really fun.
And with that, we'll leave y'all to carry on with your day. Peace.